Hi there, and welcome to this month's edition of Real Estate Matters with myself, Ayse Clay, and Clare Girton.
Hi, Ayse.
Hi, Clare. This is a show about matters in real estate, that real estate matters and is quite important, and how real estate affects us and our local neighborhoods that we live in. For some, real estate is their largest investment. And both Clare and I are residential realtors focused right here in the main line and surrounding areas. And right now we continue to be in some interesting times in the real estate market. And our aim is to bring you actual stories, some scenarios, some market terms that we speak to that may assist in the understanding of residential real estate. Yeah, and our hope is to add a little bit of humor in there as well.
Always.
So Clare, what is our topic today?
Ayse, I was thinking as we were introducing our today's show that real estate, that we're in interesting times, and we've been doing this for about 6 months now, and that made me think.
You mean being in interesting times, not working in real estate?
Right. Well, both, but being like the times in real estate are interesting, and we've been saying that, and they continue to be, and it made me wonder out loud, or in my brain. So not out loud, in my brain, like, maybe they're always interesting times. Is that as the market shifts and changes and does its market thing, that we're in interesting times. So that just came up today in my brain.
Yes, and I think your brain is on the right track, because as it shifts, sometimes we don't know it's changing until it has shifted.
Right.
And so we're always trying to stay on top of it as best as we can without having a crystal ball that no one has.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And part of our job is really a deep dive on those kind of shifts and changes. And which brings us to the reason why we chose our topic today. And our topic is a buyer consultation. So we have people who decide, I'm ready, I've saved some money, or my family's gotten too big, or a couple different reasons. There's lots of reasons why buyers kind of decide that they're going to jump into the market. And we both feel, I know you do in your business and I do too, that it's really important to take the time to do a specific buyer consultation. So I'll start with you. Why do you really feel that buyer consultation is so important?
Well, as you were speaking, I thought of something else. Sitting down and taking time with a home buyer, just not interrupted, one-on-one. Ideally, it's been in person. Recently, we've done, molded to Zoom and whatnot, which I think is great too, that face-to-face interaction. I also feel that when a buyer client agrees to do this buyer consultation with us, to go through that step with us, they're investing in what they're about to do, which for some, it is their largest investment ever, as we mentioned before in the introduction. And so when someone takes time to also sit down with us, okay, great, like they're committing, they want to be all in, they want to educate themselves, about the current state of the market, how real estate is working, just whatever information they can have. And typically I find that those buyers are going to do just fine. And so at the buyer consultation, I love to be able to educate the buyer about the current state of the market, because as you mentioned, it's, shifting, morphing. Sometimes it's the same, but maybe there's something new that we've seen in the market. So really talk about the current state of the market. That could be days on market for a property. Not that they're selling one potentially, but what we're going to look at. What's considered a long amount of time? What's considered a short amount of time in different markets that can change, right?
So would you say right now, I would say an example of something that's shifting the market is we're seeing interest rates go up a little bit. So would be something that would come up in the buyer consult? Without a doubt.
Without a doubt, in my opinion. And perhaps if that buyer is a newer buyer to enter the market, first-time buyer, perhaps they have no real bar for the interest rate, perhaps, unless maybe they've talked to a parent or a family member. But I do think if somebody's coming into the market and they do have history of buying or selling, the interest rate rather is going to be an important piece of the discussion, and that's not something we can control. But also we'll talk about like average days on market, average price point, sales price, and average list to sales price ratio, because all of that, and sometimes in different locations that can change, but I think it's great for the buyer to understand that, so they have proper expectations. So let's be real, we're setting expectations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? But also educating them on what's happening. I also think when you sit down to have a buyer consultation, from the buyer's aspect or the consumer's aspect and the realtor, if you don't know that person, right? If the buyer doesn't know you, they've just heard of you. If you don't know that buyer, that person, then you really get to maybe build the relationship right then and there. And I think that's a great basis, because you're then pouring into that person. And in turn, that can be an interview for the consumer, to the realtor. And I think it should be also. So to me, builds a good, sounding board for a relationship if you two don't know each other. It also digs deep into the client's needs and wants, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in detail. And it could be in their lifestyle, it could be in property, it could be both, right? Those needs and wants. And then lastly, so I work on a team, and for the buyer consult, we might have one person at the buyer consult. We do try to have more than one. So for our team, we will have the lead buyer's agent and the showing partner, and sometimes myself. All will want to show and display that we're all working together as a team. We've got your back, type of thing, and who they're going to be interacting with for what points and what parts. So those in my mind are really good reasons to sit down and have a buyer's consultation with a future home buyer. Typically, I'd say it takes us about, an hour, an hour and a half, sometimes give or take, right? So I'm curious, you, Claire, with being a single agent, that's one part of it, but being a whole different agent, what are your thoughts about a buyer consultation? Why do you feel like that's something important to do?
Well, it is kind of interesting that a little bit different perspective. As a team, you have several people on your team to help kind of be part of the process. And as a single agent, that process falls pretty much to me, and so I have to take that all in consideration in my buyer consultation. And I totally agree with you, Ayse, is that it is, once you do it, it gives that buyer a leg up in the market, because you're getting them to a place and an understanding of what their expectations are and what our expectations are of how this is going to go in the process. It's really important to me personally that we do pretty much a reality check. So we start, and we're going to get into that I think a little bit later, is what, besides their wants and needs, my grandfather had the best expression, our wants are many, our needs are few.
Isn't that the truth?
So I always like to keep that in the back of my head. But also a little bit of a reality check for budget, for what that looks like, what timing, what that looks like. And also, as we are getting to know each other and we go through, some questions about what your personal story is. Why are you becoming a buyer? Why are you buying right now? Maybe you've had a divorce. Maybe you've added a child. Maybe, or a couple or a family, or all different stories. So I try to ask a lot of questions, and I'm pretty sure you do as well as a team, to get a real picture of what they're going through, because that's part of the process as well. And then also, I really like them to know and be comfortable that the way I work may not be the best match for them. So I try to give them as much information as how the process goes, what I do, how I do it, so that they can ask me questions or set expectations for me as well.
Which is the whole like double interview part as well.
Exactly what you just said. So and to kind of point that out, like, it's like when you pick a college, they're accepting you, but that you also, it's a two-way street. So that's how I like to go about my buyer consultations too, is to kind of make some space there to kind of explore those things.
I like that saying.
Yeah. So, I totally agree. It is just like in a listing in the sellers, and we'll do that in another show, but it's worth the time. Sometimes buyers, I think, come to the process thinking, oh, I don't really need an agent. I just need an agent for the paperwork. And once you get through I can just look on Zillow and or on one of the nationals and get a property, and I just need somebody to do the paperwork.
Right. Or somebody might email you out of the blue that and they'll say, hey, Claire, I'm just looking for a single home, 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath in this area. Can you make it happen?
Right.
And I always find that such an interesting, hey, glad you're reaching out. We have so much more to discuss.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you. Wow, I've got so many more questions.
Well, that really is putting the cart before the horse, correct? Right? Yeah, sure. We can go start looking at houses right away, but there really is some, you have to do some preliminary thinking and structuring so that everybody can get what they want.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about, the different kind of steps in the buyer
Sure.
components?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, let's talk about the wants and needs first.
Yeah.
How do you go about that with your clients?
Yeah. As you mentioned earlier, we're going to really try to ask a lot of questions.
Yeah.
We technically have a question worksheet that we come with.
Right.
We're not going to say, here's all of your questions.
Right.
But we go off of a bullet pointed checklist. It's actually multiple pages.
Same. Yeah.
Yeah. And it just
prepared. You're prepared with the questions so that you don't miss anything.
Yes. And the questions aren't always, how many bedrooms do you want? Some of the questions will be abstract a bit. Tell me, and we were also talking, so the wants and needs, because to me they're two different things, right? You can want one thing, but that's not necessarily what you're going to end up with, or it's a must-have. And sometimes those must-haves are really a need as well. So we're really trying to separate and figure out what truly is a want and what truly is a need, so that we can build a search. And by doing that, we're asking questions. And I think you mentioned the saying, peeling the onion layers back, as to, well, why is that important to you? An example that comes up, I can hear somebody, okay, well, do you have a preference on heating? And somebody might say, well, no preference. And then they're like, you know what? Oil. I don't want oil. And so for us, we can just be an order taker as a realtor and just note down no homes with oil.
Right.
But as you know, that would rule out many homes in our area, for sure.
Especially in Chester County. Yes.
Exactly. And so we went, well, what about oil do you not prefer? And then really try to break it down. Is it and did they hear a story? So we're really trying to dig deep to figure out, versus just taking down what they're looking for, because with all that back and forth, I think they might be enlightened in some things, and some things at the end of the day that we're like, okay, no, that. And again, even hearing what they don't want is equally as important as what they might want.
So do you find people sometimes those wants and needs actually change?
They can.
As you go through the process. I can think of a time when I had a young couple, their first home, and they kept saying, we have to have a finished basement. And as we started going through the process, what they really wanted was a dry basement. So to them, the finished basement was the end result. So they ended up finding
equal dryness.
Because, but as we went through, then finally we got to a place. They did get one with a half-finished basement, but it changed. It changed for me as well, because I said to them, I said, "Oh, you just want to make sure it's a dry basement that you could finish." That was really important to them, and they both agreed. Oh yeah, that is like we could do the finishing ourselves.
Yeah, because some people just say, "Great, finished basement,"
Yeah.
and note that down.
Right.
Check.
Right. Which then would preclude you from maybe a home that was had a dry basement that had high ceilings
For
that you
sure.
could finish.
So
easily.
as we're talking to the home buyer prospect, we're jotting these notes down in order to build the multiple listing search online and in our heads. And some of the needs and wants can change right then and there, but you alluded to a need and want changing maybe down the line, which also happens. And so one part of the buyer consultation that we try to say is, hey, this is like the minimum that we're going to put together for now. Some things aren't always concrete. You might say something, but it's not always something that we can manipulate in the multiple listing service. And it's okay if something changes down the line. We're not stuck with this criteria.
And I like to work with buyers, and let's start with a broad search, and then I use the word tailor all the time. So as we search and you put it in the criteria, then you can start to tailor it rather than saying first floor master, which then precludes you from many, many, many listings, right?
Sure.
So then you would make a broad search, and then as you start to tailor it along the way, their wants and needs might become a little bit more in focus.
Yeah. Any other thoughts of the wants and needs that you mentioned that you think is important?
Well, I'm just trying to think back up on some of the buyer consultations. They're all different, right? And I always find it, the more I do this, the more years I do it, that it's okay to think big, if you will, because then,
What do you mean by that?
So sometimes, buyers, especially new buyers, young buyers, they're excited, and it's okay to think big and then get realistic. That would be something that I would say I've kind of opened up my mind to a little bit more, but getting realistic pretty quickly.
And are you getting the realistic part at the buyer consultation?
Or at least discussing it.
Okay.
So, I like people to start by saying, what are your dreams? And then let's use those dreams and get realistic about that and how those can fit. That's just personally where I am right now. But that's just something that I was thinking about as we were talking.
Okay, very cool.
How about you? Any more on your wants and needs?
No, I don't think so. Just really emphasizing the why of those wants and needs, or why not.
Yes, I agree. So I don't know if we touched on that, like why not? So let's go back to the basement. Maybe this couple had an experience with a wet basement in their history that really kept them from not wanting that, and I wouldn't know that unless I did a little bit, probed a little bit and said, well, what is it that's making you?
Yeah, or a buyer coming in and saying, I want a single detached home.
That's a good one.
Yeah, and you think, okay, well, what's your price point? And that might tailor things down a little bit. Harder to find a single in that price point. Are you open to an attached home? No, I want, and so really figuring that out. Well, what are they looking for? For some, I've shared a wall and I definitely don't, want an attached home, or I'm looking for a yard. Well, in some attached homes, you can have a yard and a great yard, so really finding out what their hot button is, but more so why. Because there could be multiple reasons. We can't just assume we know why.
I like that.
Yeah. But you noted like personal stories about wants and needs, and every home buyer is so different, and they come with a different outlook and perspective, understanding.
Right.
So really trying to understand where that at, meet them where they are, and hearing maybe a backstory around their hopes and dreams. Yeah.
And you learn a lot too along the way. That's one of my most favorite parts of the work we do is, you learn something about people's stories that you might not have learned otherwise, and it really helps me really enjoy and find joy in this work.
Love it.
That's important to me.
Yeah. Another key component of the buyer consultation is the timing. Why do you think timing is so important?
Well, isn't it true that we all have a sense of timing, right? What we think is going to take, 10 minutes to, I can make this chicken in 10 minutes is really going to take 30 minutes. The same applies, I think, for real estate, is that, we do have to do a deep dive in what it's going to take timing-wise. How much time will it take to buy a home? And so what would you say is the average? What do you...
Well, so typically from, I like to say from buyer consultation that we're doing now until making an offer and getting that offer accepted, there's no time frame on that.
I love this.
There might be a home buyer who wants to see 5 homes the first week after we have the buyer consultation and want to write an offer on one of those 5 homes after the first, week.
And we've all had that buyer.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then
there might be a buyer that, we have the buyer consultation and I feel like there's a couple, and 2 years later we're writing an offer. And maybe they only saw 5 homes in the course of 2 years. And maybe there's a buyer who we've seen 50 homes perhaps in 5 months' time. And we're still not at a point where they've seen something that they want. So usually what we do is then at that point is a reevaluation. But we look at, on average, how many homes does a buyer see before they write an offer. So we look at that as well. What is our team averaging, that kind of conversion
those are statistics that I don't really look at.
In order to give that buyer, okay, on average, a home buyer is seeing 12 homes right now in the market before they move to an offer. But I don't really have a time frame for that, right? But the quantity of homes they're seeing. Because in a market where there's a surplus of homes, that average
goes down. Right?
Yeah.
Right? Because...
Exactly. And so, when a surplus of homes, they probably might be seeing more homes on market.
Right.
And if there's not many homes, then that number is going to go down.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, that's an interesting statistic because if there's a surplus, right?
Of homes on market.
Right. If there's a surplus of homes on market, you have more choices.
Yeah.
So you might have to, so that means that there's going to be less offers.
Oh, I like that.
So that you might have to, we'll have to look at that.
I would say that could be buyer dependent.
Right.
I think if that buyer's criteria is super focused and super constricting, stringent, then yes, maybe you're only going to see a few homes.
And then you'll make an offer and you might get it because there's not going to be as much competition.
Exactly.
Yeah, we'll have to look at those, numbers out.
But from
the other way
of going under contract to close, usually that's a much more defined time frame. That in experience, we'll say anywhere, it could be as low as 20 days, if somebody's buying cash, or 15 days to 90 days longer if you're buying new construction.
You make a good point there. Lots of times people just don't know because they haven't had the experience, but I use that 45-day to 60-day as kind of a good window. And even if you're buying cash, you still need a couple days to do, if there are no contingencies, there's no appraisal, there's no inspections, you still need a couple days to get order use and occupancy and title and things. So a lot of times people think, that that you still need at least 20 days, I would say. At the very least, and at the most, I've seen things with rent backs up to 4 to 5 months. I'm sure you have as well too.
In this market,
where people need, they sold and they want it and they settle in 60 days, and then they're asking for a 2-month rent back. So it can be a little bit more lengthy, and the buyer's willing to do that to get the property that they really want.
Absolutely. And I also look at timing from 2 other standpoints versus like just timing of how long this will take, but also, well, home buyer, what does your timing look like? Because some people come to us and want to have this discussion, and they are what I call like our due diligence people. They're not going to be buying for another year or two. They still want to have this conversation right now, which I love those people, very detailed. They want to be planned out. I might be one of those people, you know, just fact collecting, information collecting, but they're not going to be ready to buy in a while. Where the timing of another buyer might be like, we really need to do this like yesterday.
That is such a good point. I mean, and here's the humor part. I recently had a buyer who had the spreadsheet of every single thing she wanted in the house and had, you know, definitely wants and needs, and we went through the whole thing, but she's not ready to buy a house for another year. So all those houses, awesome, will not be there.
Awesome, yeah.
Right, will not be there in a year, but it was great. That was a great point to bring up. So
yeah, she sounds very detailed with her spreadsheet,
yeah.
and then she's going to be ready perhaps if she looks at the listings just dripping, you know, via email, she'll be able to get a much better idea of what she can get for the dollar.
I had to be gentle with the, you know, the reality that none of these houses will be here. And I think she understood it, but, you know, it did give us a good jumping off point from the consultation.
Yes, and that timing might be a good perspective if that person is renting, let's say, and when their lease is due up, or the final one is, okay, let's say the timing is, well, yes, I want to buy. I have a home I need to sell. And so that timelines may get pushed out a good bit.
So it's an important piece of the buyer consultation is really understanding the buyer's timing, the market's timing, you know, what exactly is setting expectation around that.
For sure, like the market timing. And how about the dollars and cents, Claire?
Oh, this is always fun, isn't it? Yeah. I always enjoy that starting there with buyers is, you know, what do they think their budget is? And then once you start to kind of get a general idea of what they think their budget is, and then you can direct them and partner with vendors, mortgage advisors, financing.
I was going to ask, at what point in time are these home buyers, let's say they're not buying with cash, although there's a good amount of people who do, they need a mortgage. Are they going to you first and then talking to a lender? Are they talking to a lender first and then coming to you?
Well, I find it can go either way. I always make a very big point to say, it won't do us any good to go out and look at properties until we have a clear picture. However it comes. If they went to a finance person first and then came to me, or if they came to me, I say, here are some finance people that I can recommend, maybe you some on your own, but do yourself a good service by connecting and getting that information right away. So then we can really be productive.
Yeah.
How about you? How do you? Same?
The same. Sometimes people come already with a mortgage pre-qualification, and some really need, they're coming to us first to guide them, you know, step by step or component by component. So either way, I'm happy to talk with, you know, someone about their home buying needs, right?
I have to say, in something that this swift market has given us in a positive way is I find buyers are very savvy. They have a better idea because they're watching and they're really looking at, and you know, things, there's tools out there for financing that, so I'm cheered by that, even though I do get them directed professionally. But I think that buyers are savvy.
That's right, more information online than ever before.
Right?
Yeah. And there's more to financing and budget. I think taxes are a huge component of that.
Sure.
So what locations is the home buyer looking in will then determine their price point. So I say, all right, if taxes are here, then your price point's coming down sometimes. And if taxes are down here, then their price point can go up a bit.
So the statistic that we really want to find is, what is it going to cost you a month to own this property. And that could include condo fees, HOA, taxes, some school districts are insurance. So that when they have, and then what they're comfortable with, sometimes people can afford more, but they'd rather not be spending whatever a month. And that also, I think, is really an important component.
And like the needs and wants, I think sometimes budget can change throughout the course of
the process. Yep.
Exactly. And I think lastly, we were talking about strategies for making an offer in today's market. That is going to be another key component of the buyer consultation. And there's lots of strategies we have right now. We're not going to go into all of them.
Sure.
But I find if you're talking about the strategies and the buyer's face looks like they saw a ghost. Right. This might not be that market for them.
It's a good point. Also, you made me think comfort level. Sometimes buyers, when they get explained all the strategies, or they get choices for the strategies, would you like to waive inspections? Would you like to not waive inspections? Would you like to pay cash? Would you like not? Once you start to work on that, that their comfort level is hugely paramount.
So giving choices, you think?
Yeah, or if I've found myself saying, if you look like a ghost and you're not comfortable, we're not ready.
Yeah.
So I think you made that a really point.
May need to wait until the market meets where your comfort
level is.
And some people say, hey, no, I need to, and then we'll have another discussion.
Yeah, very interesting though, isn't it? As certain buyers, I had someone pay way over, and I kept, my comfort level wasn't good. She said, this is my house. Cool. Yeah. This was my house. So she was comfortable. Yeah. So that's interesting too.
Yeah, for sure.
Lots to talk about.
Yeah, lots to talk about. And so just to kind of wrap it up a little bit, it sounds like we're setting, with this buyer consultation, a good amount of expectations, and maybe the home buyer is setting expectations for us. What would be your wrap up?
Well, I would say, Ayse, as we do these shows every time, we always find, we could talk about that for another 20 minutes. But the most important thing that came out of our discussion today, I really feel, is that it's important to do a buyer consultation if you're a buyer and an agent, either way. And it can be really valuable for any buyers in the market.
Really, it's just an investment of time.
It really is, and worth it.
Gosh, paramount comes to mind.
Yes,
that word.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll have to come and sit in one of your buyer consults someday, because I think it's really, we can learn from each other, and we do.
That's for sure. Well, thank you for discussing this as always.
Yeah, thank you, Ayse.
Yeah, great to see you, Clare.
And you.